The very basketball I learned today is a foul. Yeah. You can't run through a screen. That's
I think we
crazy.
should make this a sports show. We can talk about Brownie next.
Yeah. We can do this. We can go all day with this.
I could do this all day.
Take it away from the top.
From the top. Well, welcome to 6 Minute Increments. We're here today with Pat Soccer from M&T Bank, our longtime banker. We've had a great relationship with you. Pat, welcome.
Well, Brett, Beth, it's great to be here. I really appreciate it.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the banking industry?
Yeah, so I'm not a lifelong banker.
You are
actually.
not?
Oh, I didn't. Already I'm learning
so I
something.
I'm not one of those jaded long-term bankers. I started off kind of almost 3 careers, I would call it. Out of college, I was in insurance for about 10 years, doing a variety of different things. And then I shifted over to healthcare. So I was a business development officer there. So I would started in pharmaceuticals, then went to medical device. And in the tail end of my healthcare career, I was in electronic medical records when that was starting to become booming. And so I ended up doing that for about 2.5 years. Actually felt like 20 and a half because of my travel. I was all over the country, coast to coast.
I was going to ask, I know that work is very lucrative.
Yep.
You can make really good money doing that. So I was wondering why you left. It's because too much travel.
Too much travel,
Yeah.
a family. I wasn't seeing the family. My daughters were young. And the tipping point is when my youngest daughter asked my wife, when they were watching home videos, has daddy ever been home during the week? I was already struggling at that point with the traveling.
Yeah.
And about six months later, I was out. Good friend, college buddy, housemate, worked at M&T Bank, told me about the job. And I'm like, all right, I've been in sales, business development for a long time. I can learn tax returns. I can learn financial statements and how to crunch those. So I actually interviewed with M&T. Didn't get the job the first time. They gave it to someone else, which actually was deserved. He was a lifelong banker, but he had relationships. I had no relationships coming in here, and because I was not even working in New York State. At the time, I was all over the country, as I mentioned, and I went to Citizens Bank for a cup of coffee, worked there, but I kept competing against M&T Bank. And what really intrigued me was working with small business owners and the day-to-day grind that they have. How can, as a bank or a banker, how can you help them? So the more I learned about that, and the more I saw that M&T is it's a huge focus for M&T in that space, I kept my interviewing going with them and eventually got the job.
So 6 Minute Increments is meant to be looking at that interplay between law, finance, business. And you mentioned, I think, the key word for all of us, relationships. I mean, when you work with a client or a customer, how do you go about developing that relationship? What should a customer be looking for in their banker?
Yeah, great question. I get to know the person first. First and foremost, when I meet with someone for the first time,
I knew he wasn't originally a banker because we've met.
No.
That's exactly right. We go back a ways. So it's really get to know them, get their personal background, what motivates them, why, if someone's starting a business, let's say, why? What intrigues you about that? Why is this opportunity important to you? So I get to know them first on a personal level and what their end goals are. And then from there, it develops from there, right? I'm not a loan officer. There's some in town that are loan officers, do transactions only. I'm a banker. So I'm going to manage that relationship holistically. I'm going to meet with clients during the course of the year to find out what's going on. And there may be nothing that they need, but they may need something in 3 to 6 months. And having that continued dialogue, my clients text me, call me, at all different hours. But it's great. They become friends over time, and I really enjoy it.
Do you find that a lot of customers early on find that relationship, they're surprised by it? So I take, for instance, I work with a lot of small clients. I also have a lot of bigger clients. They always know their banker. And my wife started her own practice. And I think she was surprised at the idea that you should know your banker. And for years at SCORE and other things, I've talked about this, but I'm curious what your experience is, how often they come to you seeking the relationship, or you kind of surprise them that it develops?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it surprises them because a majority, to your point, are not they don't have that experience. And then when I ask them, like, who do you work with at your bank? Their eyes widen, and I'm
Teller.
exactly.
Right.
That's
Right.
exactly the
The
point.
ATM machine.
Right. They go into a branch and they think that that's a relationship where it's a transaction. Certainly, there's relationships within the branches. I'm not saying that, but when it comes to small business and being a I'm a consultant. I am not. I don't think of myself in sales. It's really that consulting approach that I take, and they're very surprised. And I think some, and I get to know them. But like I said, when you get to know their end goal, some smaller percentage, they want to be a little bit more transactional, and that's fine. So I know that, and that's how we treat the relationship. But I would say that 80-20 rule is where 80% want to really have a lifeline, and the COVID and PPP really bore that out. When it was long hours, but reaching out to my clients, I was charged to reach out to my portfolio clients and say, hey, here's the process, here's how this works, here's the eligibility requirements, et cetera, and then help them make those submissions. That really bore out with who had a relationship and who did not.
So we represent a number of small businesses, and I find with those businesses, oftentimes it's their first time using a lawyer, and there's a lot of education and hand-holding that goes along in that process. Do you find that as well with the small businesses that you work? Do you have to educate them on some of the financial aspects of their business? Because a lot of them, like, they know how to make the widget,
Yep.
but they don't necessarily know the financial part of making that a successful business.
Yeah, 100%, Beth. I always ask who your partners are, right? And if they don't have a partner in different areas, whether it be legal or accounting or insurance, what have you, it is part of that relationship growth that we just talked about over the course of time. And I love it. I love that part because, for me, there's only so many loans, so many deposit accounts, so many other, banking services that we're going to provide. But it's providing that true value add to be able to partner them so they can make their widgets and take all that other noise away from them and be successful as they can. Big on education at M&T and what we do, for example, fraud. And we've actually, Brett's been involved in some of the seminars. We educate highly with fraud, and we have a fraud team, I would lack of a better term, that will help do that. And certainly we have those services that help layer and mitigate risk. But that's a big part of what we do is educating. And it could be on the credit side. It could be, hey, how do I get my credit score better? How do I get
Just
ready?
understanding why a check clears. It is amazing how many people get into business and they just check process, uniform commercial code that applies. They're just not familiar with it. So wire transfers and
100%.
the learning curve on doing a wire transfer. Right now, I mean, one of the things I know that you've worked on over the years are SBA loans. Can you explain a little bit for the audience, like what is an SBA loan?
Yeah.
Why do you look to that with different business owners? Who qualifies, that kind of stuff?
Sure. So Small Business Administration is the SBA, and they partner with banks to help provide capital and financing where it may not be available. For example, startup financing or startup business, use that a lot for that. So what happens is the SBA shares in the risk with the bank from a percentage perspective. So what happens is that the bank can get more comfortable providing X number of dollars for working capital, equipment, et cetera, to a newer business. And it allows them also to put less money, the business owner potentially to put in less upfront capital themselves into the project. A lot on the real estate side with the SBA 504 program, certainly do a lot with that. And it's a great opportunity. Again, the biggest advantage there is it's less that the buyer has to put down from a down payment perspective. Huge advantage there. And acquisition financing. I do a lot of acquisition financing here in town. We use that from again mitigating risk, but it also less upfront that the buyer has to put in.
One of the other packages, I mean, I've talked to a lot of clients and I encourage them to always go to their bank, is understanding loans versus lines of credit.
Yeah.
And when they're both useful.
Yeah.
And how do you talk to clients or as you prepare a package for them and explain those two elements?
Yeah, great question. So a line of credit is
I'm
really...
a lawyer. I'm good at questions.
I was actually surprised you've had two great ones today,
Yeah.
Brett.
They're softballs.
That's right. They are softballs. A line of credit is for
Got
short.
a hard one coming.
All right. I'm ready. I'm ready. Short-term working capitals for lines of credit, right? So it could be inventory, it could be adding payroll, it could be that short-term expenses that a customer has or business has. Loans is more for your capex or your capital expenditures. So it could be equipment, vehicles, things of that nature. Where also there could be depreciation events that come with that. So really the main difference is what the use of the funds are for.
I guess the big one I think that's out there right now is just generally what you're seeing in the lending markets. I think a lot of people are watching the news. They see quote unquote volatility. How have local banks worked with businesses to ease their fears? To what extent are you seeing lending still being, prevalent out there? What are your thoughts just in, lending and what small business owners should be thinking about? I always find they wait too long to come talk to the bank. What would you give as advice to somebody on those topics right now?
Yeah.
I told you this one's tough.
Yeah, this is a little tougher, but I'm ready for it. I would say Q4 last year, there was a little bit of a slowing down as far as I think conversations I was having regarding, hey, we're doing something, right? We're going to buy a business, we're going to buy some equipment.
Is that unusual? Is it usually different in Q4?
No, not necessarily. I think there was waiting for what was going to happen in the election, where the economy was headed, things like that. I would say that I've had, I'm definitely feeling actually bullish based on my conversations I've had. I've had more conversations regarding, hey, acquisition financing, particularly. I've got a fair amount of that right now. But just also strategizing for the year. Hey, yesterday I got a client reached out, Pat, I need to buy a vehicle. We're expanding our fleet. So those are all positive signs. So I say overall, it's in a good spot. I think the word tariff is scaring people.
Yeah.
I don't want to say scaring. I think the uncertainty, right? Markets react to that. So I think the way I view it personally is this first half of the year going to be a little ups and downs. I think things may level out toward the back half of the year, but it's certainly anyone's guess on that.
I definitely have seen on the M&A side, the mergers and acquisitions, over the last 3 years, there has been a pretty steady trend of increasing M&A work. I know in the Bar Association, it's been a heavily talked about topic. What do you suggest? I mean, I know I have thoughts about how clients should go about this, but how do you suggest that a client comes to you to start talking about doing a merger and acquisition? When's the right time to bring in the bank?
Yeah, I would say earlier than later. For sure. I mean, it could be something we're thinking about for the back half of the year or toward the end of the year. I really think the most effective transactions I've done on an acquisition perspective is when I've been in there months ahead.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I mean,
when you've had a passing thought, maybe that's the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of the times the deal might get done depending on if you tried to sign it and then close, or you're going to have this interim period. And one of the contingencies is always we got to go get bank financing.
Right.
There's a huge amount of risk whenever I see that, if I'm the seller, that maybe they can't get the bank financing. And now we've wasted a lot of time, energy, and effort working out a deal that is not actually fundable because the buyer, for whatever reason, can't.
Right.
And that actually wastes a lot of time. So.
And I think also that is making sure when I talked about who are your partners, speaking to someone on the legal side who is experienced in M&A work and really knows knows SBA work, right? I can't tell you how many times I've gotten in transactions where, if the attorney, one of the attorneys is not comfortable with the SBA, it does drag things out, and it's more costly, quite frankly. So
Time
and
money.
Time.
We bill in 6 minute increments.
That's
Right.
exactly right. Exactly right.
They get expensive.
Yeah. And I'm donating my time right now.
There
so
you
we
go.
figure that out, Brett.
So are we.
That's right.
We're double billing.
Oh, I'm not getting a bill? Good.
Well, we're going to write it off.
All right, good,
Okay.
good. But I couldn't agree with both of you more on earlier than later. Absolutely get in there and have those conversations, because there's going to be things that I'm going to need to start vetting that, and it could be financial projections. That's one of them. There are
Just the corporate records, making sure they have
Correct.
authority.
Yeah, exactly right. It's exactly right. So a lot going into it.
I mean, I always have recommended to clients as well, don't try to silo off the bank, the accountant, the lawyer. The sooner you get all of us into the same arena, the smoother and faster everything works, because
Love that. Yeah.
the bank's going to have your requirements for getting a loan, the buyer or the seller, there's a contract going on there. The accountants are looking at things. When they try to put us each in a different little bucket, it almost always costs more. It takes longer. But that is the hardest thing, I think, for clients to do, because they think that they're just getting billed more. So
Right.
there's a lot of education. I do
Yeah.
find that the more somebody has done M&A, the smoother and faster that process goes.
Agreed. And I think also if I'm working with someone earlier on, I tend to say, hey, here's some good questions you might want to ask, right? The seller, and it could be regarding the goodwill part, right? Customer lists. It could be about suppliers and vendors, because we're going to ask about that. When I'm doing my analysis and I'm doing my workup to submit it for underwriting review, I'm going to want to say, hey, who are their suppliers and vendors? How many do they have? Who are their customer lists? What do those contracts look like? Having that information up front versus kind of winging it is huge for a buyer.
I don't want to eat up too much more of your time, because we value time. We bill based on time.
Appreciate
But
that.
you mentioned the magic word, that one thing I think clients don't often know, maybe you could explain a little more, is underwriting. What in the world is underwriting?
They are the dream killers. No, I'm kidding.
I love
All
that.
the underwriters, it's okay.
I know. They are a vital part, obviously, the process, and we
Some dreams should die.
well, sometimes the right answer is no, right? I mean,
You're just going to get yourself into a mess.
right. So how I work it, and we work at the bank at M&T. I really do up to about 90% of the underwriting. So I'm actually going to do the financial spreads. I'm going to look at all the,
I didn't know that either.
financial statements, and I'm going to be able to show my client, hey, here's what the cash flow looks like. Just kind of level set and have a base there. Package up that, and I put in an executive summary in my write up, and here's why we should do this deal. This is why we should finance this. The underwriters are the one that actually make the decision. Right, they're the ones that do the credit. They do additional credit review, financial spreads, and then they make that decision. What's nice in my world, at least the way we do it, is I can still speak to my underwriter. We have those open dialogues, we have those conversations, and we set up calls if it's not quote unquote a slam dunk and it makes total sense. We're just gonna have a conversation about it and come up with a structure that is right, because the structure I submit, they may be thinking something different, and I actually have negotiations with my underwriter to come up with a meaningful structure that's going to be benefit, quite frankly, the client and the bank. And it's going to be a good working structure.
I have a question. I know, but I'm curious. As I'm hearing about these processes, is M&T or are banks generally implementing AI into this? And if so, how so?
M&T is not an early adopter.
Okay.
We like to see how things go first. We don't just jump in right away on everything. When we do, we are all in.
Yeah.
So I think we're monitoring that right now and kind of, I would say, putting our toe into that, and it will be part of a lot of things, including banking.
Right.
But I think more to come on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do think that underwriting process, and for clients to understand, they look at banks. If you're not looking at a regional bank, you don't always understand that the quote unquote underwriters, the ones who are approving your loan, live in San Francisco. And the market there infringes on their viewpoint of your business, which maybe in a regional market looks great, but on a global or national scale looks bad. To what extent do you have to talk to clients just to explain that?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that is true for the larger banks, right? That you don't know where that underwriter is, especially since post-COVID, right? Where you see people working all over the place. For us, me personally at M&T, mine are in Syracuse.
Yep.
They are familiar with the markets. Syracuse and Rochester are pretty familiar markets, but I've been working with my underwriter for 10 years, so they know the Rochester market and surrounding counties. So quite frankly, it's a competitive advantage for me, because they do know the market. And I do get in those conversations once in a while with my clients on that part of the process. I would say quite a bit, actually, now that I think about it, because they want to know what's the next step. What's the next step? What's the next step? And how long this is going to take. So setting the right expectation on that is also key.
Yeah, time, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't get a loan tomorrow? No, that's not how this is going to work.
Right. Yeah. Right. We're not an equipment lender, right?
Right.
We're not. We're in it for a relationship, and we started at the top with that. And I truly mean that. I tell my clients up front, it's like, look, I'm gladly going to do the loans. I'm gladly going to do deposit accounts, cash management services, what have you. But where we in the bank, or me in the bank, really excel is with a long-term relationship over years.
I have another question. I'm sorry. I'm brimming with
Fire
questions.
away.
And then we'll let you go. So do you work directly with a lot of lawyers in your day-to-day? And what drives you crazy about lawyers? And what do you think is a good quality in lawyers? Like, what's your perspective on the lawyers?
You're
Yeah.
going to call them out in this.
I love
And
it.
be
Hear this,
honest.
Pat.
You know me. I'm very transparent,
go.
Brett. You know me. I don't hold back. Absolutely.
A good golf game.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's essential for
You're
sure.
not going to like me then.
Yeah, only if you like to have fun on the golf course.
That's true.
I'm done
That's
playing
true.
with those who don't like to have fun. Absolutely. It's regularly speaking with attorneys. And it could be regarding, hey, I have a client for you that I think would be a good fit for you. Or it's right in the middle of a transaction and back and forth. I think just expectation and on response times. I think that's the biggest thing. And some people may say that about me. Maybe mine's not quick enough for them. But I think just having someone that you can get connected with quickly and get an answer. And that's what I love. Like sometimes I'd reach out to Brett or others in the group here and say, hey, how do you, I got this scenario. What's this look like? Am I on the wrong track here? Or does this not make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I wrong? Right. But being able to call, email, text, I guess attorneys in my network is important to me for response time. And it's better service for my client.
My only last quick question for you is, Pat, I mean, M&T is a very large regional bank. It's got a lot of different clients, but for those who are out there, I mean, who's a good fit for you as a banker? I mean, bankers have different clients they might like to work with or have different expertise. Who do you say is like a good client fit for you?
Yeah. So my world, again, is small business banking, and we define that in my group as a startup to a $10 or $15 million family-owned, privately held company. I have a few that are larger than that, but my core is probably $2.5 million revenue to $15 million revenue is kind of my core. Mm-hmm. The industry type, client type is I'm agnostic when it comes to that. We work with a wide variety of different industry types. And my clients are with me for a long time because my bandwidth to do the size loans and credit limits that I do is pretty good, pretty wide, where majority of my clients, based on their need and type of client and size they are, stay with me for a long time.
Well, excellent. We appreciate you coming today. We appreciate your time. As always.
Yes. Please take a moment to like and share. Share with somebody you know, share with a friend, share with an enemy.
There you go.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Pat.
it.
Thanks.